So I did this style of video about a year ago for 2024 and 2025, and people seem to really enjoy it. So here we are with an updated version to include all of the new Visions of Eternity elite specializations. Instead of segregating them based on role like I did before, so like Boon DPS, Condi DPS, etc., I will be separating them based on specializations themselves. I'll also try to make note of any expansion requirements as we move through these builds, as well as any alterations to these builds if there are alternatives available. And at the end, I will give my recommendations for the open world builds alongside some meta commentary on where these builds kind of land in the meta in comparison to the other available options. I'll save all that stuff for last, so if you're just here for builds, there are timestamps in the description or on the playhead. So with that said, welcome to the Ultimate Guardian build guide for 2025 and 2026. Getting started with the Dragonhunter, this specialization only really has one role, which is power DPS. You are required to own Heart of Thorns at a minimum, but you will also require Janthier Wilds if you want to play the most optimal version of this build. Getting started with gear, the easiest way to gear is full Berserker's gear with Rune of the Dragonhunter and Relic of the Dragonhunter. However, you can incorporate Dragon's gear to increase your vitality. If you choose to mix gear here, the full gear set looks like this. The extra vitality does increase your DPS a little bit, but ultimately full Berserkers is just fine. For food, you're going to run cilantro, sous vide steak, and superior sharpening stones, or if you want to use non-ascended food, you can run sweet and spicy butternut squash. Your weapon choices are going to be longbow and greatsword, or spear and greatsword if you own Janthier Wilds. That is better than longbow and greatsword, but they're basically the same. All weapon sets run force and impact sigils, and for traits you are going to run Radiance 333, Zeal 223, and Dragonhunter 123. For skills, you want Purification, Procession of Blades, Sword of Justice, Bane Signet, and Dragon's Maw. You can use Litany of Wrath instead, which is what I personally prefer, but the Purification Trap will help you upkeep Relic of the Dragonhunter. Covering the playstyle of this build, it's actually pretty similar regardless of which weapon set alteration you use. You basically want to use your F1 to tether the target, you want to use your traps as frequently as you can, and you want to stand in symbols, primarily your symbol of resolution. All of these things are damage modifiers that stack on top of each other, allowing you to get those high numbers. Ensuring that you use your big hitting attacks while you have these stacked up is critical to success on this build. The modifiers are Big Game Hunter by using your F1, Retribution, increasing damage while having resolution, Righteous Instincts, which increases your critical strike chance while having resolution, Symbolic Avenger increases DPS while standing in a symbol, and Relic of the Dragonhunter increases your DPS to enemies that have been hit by your traps. Your resolution sources are your Greatsword 4 and your heal skill. The rest is about using your symbols and standing in them while you do your thing. Since power DPS is the only thing that Dragonhunter does, it actually does have two competing builds, and so I will briefly cover the Virtues variation, which I personally do not recommend, but you should know that it exists. The Virtues build runs full Assassin's gear, excluding a Berserker's helmet and a Berserker's ring. This build runs an Assassin's spear and Greatsword with force and accuracy sigils on both weapons. For traits, you want Virtues 111, Zeal 223, and Dragonhunter 323. This build operates very similarly to the Radiance version. However, the main difference is what juices it up through its modifiers. Instead of relying on the resolution buff, you are reliant on Aegis due to the trait Unscathed Contender. I found that while in theory this build produces high numbers, or in experienced static groups or super optimized groups it can produce high numbers, it is definitely less consistent than the Radiance version. Play what you want, but I'm confident that in general group play with random pugs, you would be better and more consistent with the Radiance variation of this build. And that pretty much wraps up the Dragonhunter. Moving on, we have the Firebrand. The Firebrand is one of the best elite specializations in the entire game. It has a strong condition DPS build, It has a strong boon support build, and it is home of the Guardian's primary healing specialization. For this spec, you have to have Path of Fire, and for the optimal DPS options, you also need Secrets of the Obscure. The primary boon that the Firebrand provides through its boon support and healing specs is Quickness, but the specialization has large access to other boons, Reflex, Stability, Aegis, and Crowd Control. Even Firebrands with a full DPS setup have inherent access to their utility through their tomes. We'll get started with the Condi DPS build, which is the Condi Firebrand. For gear, we are running full Viper's gear with Runes of the Trapper. You can run a Sinister backpack if you want to min-max, but if not, Viper's works just fine. You'll be running Relic of the Fractal with 2 weapon sets, Axe Torch and Pistol with Smoldering and Bursting sigils on both weapon sets. For food, you're going to want cilantro, cured meat flatbread, and toxic tuning crystals. If you don't have ascended food, you can run Plate of Beef Rendang. For traits, you're going to want to run Radiance 221, Zeal 233, and Firebrand 112. For skills, you want Mantra of Solace, Purging Flames, Mantra of Flame, Signet of Wrath, and Mantra of Liberation. Your flex skill is Signet of Wrath, so if you need stability, Aegis, Reflex, or crowd control for your group, you want to put it there instead of taking that Signet. The DPS aspect of this build is very spammy. It is fairly high APM, but it revolves around a skill priority and your tome pages. You want to use Purging Flames off of cooldown, using Symbol of Ignition, Symbol of Vengeance, Zealot's Flame, and skills 4, 2, and 5 in your F1 tome. These 2, 4, and 5 skills should be used off cooldown, so you'll be dipping into tomes often. Skill 5 and Purging Flames have a similar cooldown, so you could use one to track the other, and always pair either Skill 5 or Skill 4 in tomes with Skill 2 in tome. In short, you'll be rotating the use of Skill 2 with one of these other skills in the tome after its initial usage. On Axe Torch, you want to prioritize Symbol of Vengeance, Blazing Edge, and Zealot's Flame, Zealot's Fire charges, which is your torch for. On Pistol, you want to prioritize Symbol of Ignition, combined with Hail of Justice and Peacekeeper. Also use Jurisdiction once on this weapon set every rotation. Both symbols are used twice per weapon cycle, so in short, spam all your stuff. Moving forward to the Quickness Condition Firebrand, which is the Firebrand's boon support option. We are going to be running full Ritualist gear with Runes of the Trapper and Relic of the Fractal. Again, you can run a Sinister backpack if you want, but full Ritualist also works fine. For weapons, you are going to be running Pistol Torch and Offhand Pistol with Sigil of Bursting and Smoldering on both weapon sets. The food is standard, so cured meat flatbread or a plate of beef rendang. However, for the Quickness DPS utility, we want Magnanimous Tuning Crystals. For traits, you are going to be running Radiance 221, Virtues 321, and Firebrand 212. For skills, you're going to bring Mantra of Solace, Purging Flames, Mantra of Potence, Mantra of Flame, and Feel My Wrath. The DPS rotation is similar to the Condi DPS Firebrand. Since you are running Pistol Torch and Pistol, it is quite a bit easier to manage since you're only managing the cooldowns of your Tome 1 and your offhand weapon blindly, as opposed to full weapon set skills. The rotation is essentially use all your weapon skills off cooldown, prioritize Symbol of Ignition, Jurisdiction, Peacekeeper, and Zealot's Flame. For your F1, BAM 2, 4, and 5. Also use Mantra of Flame and Purging Flames off of cooldown. But wait, what about Quickness? Your Quickness generation is fairly easy. All you need to do is use Mantra of Potence off cooldown and make sure that you are aiming the cone at the group. With Pistol, you can stand behind the group a little bit to ensure everyone is splashed with the entire cone. Additionally, you want to use one charge of your heal skill periodically since that will provide quickness, as well as using Feel My Wrath off of cooldown. You should have enough boon duration to overcap on this build and build up for phase shifts and so on. And with the trait weighty terms, you should try and use the final charge of your mantras, be it Flame or Potence, after you use your pages in your F1 tome, so that way you can rebuild them. The next build for the Firebrand is, of course, the famous Heal Firebrand. The Heal Firebrand is one of the most versatile healers in the game, commonly used in fractals and raids due to its large access to Aegis, stability, and crowd control. While this build is fairly complex due to needing to know how this build interacts interacts with its various traits. For the purposes of this explanation, I'll be going over generally what this build can provide. However, I have done standalone videos on this particular build and many others as well. As far as Heal Firebrand is concerned, this build hasn't changed a whole lot, and really it has only gotten better as the devs have relaxed some of the nerfs to this build to keep it in line with the new healing option. Getting started with the gear, you can run full Harriers, full Minstrels, full Givers, or a mix of any of those gear sets. You will be wanting Rune of Water for the additional boon duration, as well as Relic of the Flock, which heals or provides barrier when you use your healing skill. Your weapons will be Axe, Shield, and Staff with concentration and transference sigils on both weapon sets. For food, you are going to run Bowl of Fruit Salad with mint garnish and Bountiful Maintenance Oil, or Delicious Rice Balls if you don't have Ascended food. Traits are going to be a little bit messy because while being able to provide 100% uptime of every boon is in fact good as a healer, many other classes will passively provide boons, and your boon support will also provide boons. So I'll go over a few different options for traits and share with what I feel is the best for me and how I like to play. Does this mean that you may have boon dropouts? If you are in a vacuum, sure, you cannot provide all of them. However, in 99% of other scenarios, you will gain passive boon help from your team to cover the missing ones. So if you're not interested in Heal Firebrand, you can skip to the timestamp on the screen now. However, we're about to get into it. The default loadout for this build in terms of traits are Honor 332, Virtues 333, and Firebrand 211. The only mandatory utilities are Mantra of Solace and Mantra of Potence. These traits give you might generation through critical strikes, additional stability when you activate your F3 virtue, as well as healing and might and resistance generation when you disable a foe. Combine these traits with your must-have utilities, Mantra of Solace and Mantra of Potence, alongside your staff skills and F2 and F3 virtues. You have access to every boon in the game and are able to maintain them at 100% uptime. However, depending on your preferred utilities, alterations to traits will better serve this build in realistic situations, allowing you to provide more healing, give your weapon skills lower cooldown, and be able to provide critical boons more easily. My preferred playstyle is through using the trait setup Honor 312, Virtues 322, and Firebrand 223. What you lose in generating some boons like resistance, you make up for in passive healing for your party. Additionally, it allows you to clear conditions easily without having to take utility skills since it builds them into your kit. The adjustment of the Honor trait to Honorable Staff gives you more use of your primary healing weapon. The bulk of your healing kit is tied to the staff and symbols, which Honorable Staff allows you to use these skills more frequently. The bulk of your might generation and healing comes from Staff 4, which again, you can use more frequently. The adjustment of the Virtues trait gives more utility to your group passively by taking both Battle Presence and Absolute Resolve. You are juicing up your healing and Condi cleanse, as well as sharing the passive healing effects of your Virtue trait to your subgroup within a 600-degree radius. The adjustment of the Firebrand traits to Stalwart Speed and Lore Master gives you more passive page generation instead of relying on blowing all of your mantra charges to regain pages. But importantly, Stalwart Speed allows for alternative utilities to also provide quickness in a range that is larger than your 450-degree cone. With Stalwart Speed, your utility skills, Advance and Stand Your Ground, as well as F3, Skill 5, as well as your Elite Mantra, Mantra of Liberation, will all provide additional quickness when providing Aegis or stability. This loadout is how you are able to have good quickness uptime while taking advantage of Firebrand's large access to stability and Aegis. It also allows you to better manage conditions through the use of your F2 without sacrificing the passive effect while sharing the effect to your allies. For me, this is my preferred way to play the class. However, a mix of these may be more ideal for you. You could always just play around with it, pick what you like. The Guardian's optional utilities are good and situational, especially stand your ground and advance. They are almost always slotted into my bar permanently. However, you can use Sanctuary and Bane Signet to basically solo CC many encounters. This build has one of the higher mastery curves because of the traits and skills, the way they interact with each other. However, it is still one of the best healers in the game, and it is one of the most versatile healers in the game. So I definitely recommend you check this one out. Moving on to Willbender. The Willbender is primarily looked at for its fast-paced playstyle, high mobility, and large number of hits per second. It has a power and Condi builds as well as a heal build available to it, though I will only be covering the Condi Willbender here. The healing build and power builds are fairly niche and are outshined by the emergence of the Luminary in Visions of Eternity. However, if you do not own Visions of Eternity, I do cover the Power Willbender and Power Alacrity Willbender in my 2024 Guardian Guide, as well as having a standalone video on the Heal Willbender. Those videos are still accurate, and a link to them will be in the description below. To have access to the Willbender, you will need the End of Dragons expansion, as well as the Secrets of the Obscure expansion for the optimal build for the Condi variants. So for the Condi DPS Willbender, for the gear you are going to run full Viper's armor with Runes of Balthazar, and for all of your trinkets you are going to run full Sinisters, excluding a singular Viper's ring and Relic of the Fractal. For weapons, you'll be using Pistol Torch with Offhand Pistol, with Sigil of Bursting and Air on the Pistol Torch set, and Sigil of Torment in your Offhand Pistol. Your food is going to be cilantro, cured meat flatbread, and toxic tuning crystals, or plate of beef rendang for non-ascent food. For traits, you are going to be running Radiance 221, Virtues 311, and Willbender 112. For skills, you want to run Litany of Wrath, Purging Flames, Whirling Light, Signet of Wrath, and Heaven's Palm. In the event you want some other utilities like Sanctuary, Bane Signet, Stand Your Ground, or Advance, you can swap it out with Signet of Wrath. For the rotation, this rotation is similar to the QDPS rotation since you are running the same weapon sets. The only difference is you will be using your virtues instead of your tomes. In any case, you are going to try to maximize the cooldown reducing effect of the trait Restorative Virtues. So your priority skills are F1 Rushing Justice, Purging Flames, Symbol of Ignition, and using Peacekeeper twice per weapon swap. You should be using Whirling Light off cooldown, but inside of your Purging Flames or while Restoring Virtues is active. Your F2 and F3 can be used as gap filler skills, but delay them a few seconds after casting F1 because only one set of Willbender Flames can be active, and you want the F1 flames out. While you're on your offhand torch, spam Zealous Fire. When you're in your offhand pistol, use Hail of Justice 3 times as long as Symbol of Ignition is down. After every cast of one of these priority skills, use Jurisdiction. This build is very high APM, and the faster you can get these skills off in an order that makes sense, the better your DPS will be. There is a Scepter version of this build which has identical gear, and trait-wise the only difference is that you run Scepter Pistol and Pistol Torch weapon sets, and the rotation involves using the Symbol of Punishment. Overall, I would recommend the Pistol Torch variation of the build, and while I would like to cover the Power DPS and Power Alacrity DPS Willbender builds, both of these builds are basically now legacy. While they still do exist and you can play them, they have been outshined by the Luminary. But as far as the Willbender goes in 2025 and 2026, we are left with the Condi Willbender, which is the best Condi DPS build that the Guardian has. Speaking of the Luminary, let's move on to the Luminary. This specialization is new and it's still evolving, primarily a power-focused spec, and there are currently 3 builds that are out in regards to the Luminary: a Power Luminary, a Power Alacrity Luminary, and a Heal Alacrity Luminary. It operates similarly to the Power Willbender builds in a sense, as it has a fast-paced rotation and it is limited in its range DPS output. But in any case, it has high benchmark numbers for its builds. It's fairly easy to provide its primary boon, which is Alacrity, and it's new, so what's there not to like? For the Luminary, you will require Visions of Eternity as well as Janthier Wilds for access to the elite specialization and the spear weapon. Getting started with the power DPS Luminary for gear, you are going to want to run full Berserker's gear with Dragonhunter runes and Relic of the Claw. Like the power DPS Dragonhunter, you can choose to run a mix of Dragon's gear instead of full Berserkers for a slight DPS increase and more vitality. For weapons, you are going to be running Spear and Greatsword with Force and Impact sigils on both sets. For food, you're going to run Cilantro, Lime, Sous Vide Steak, and Superior Sharpening Stones, or Sweet and Spicy Butternut Squash if you don't have Ascended food. For traits, you are going to run Radiance 333, Zeal 223, and Luminary 332. For utilities, you're going to run Litany of Wrath, Piercing Stance, Effulgent Stance, Bane Signet, and Daring Advance. For the rotation, your Spear and Greatsword rotation, you are going to follow the normal weapon rotation, prioritizing Illuminated and the Symbol on Spear, while you prioritize the Symbol and Skill 2 on Greatsword. However, where this build differs is you will also try to get as many light auras as possible and detonate them with your utility skills. You gain light auras through the trait Justice's Blind by applying blinds, so you can get it from your Greatsword Leap Skill 3. You can get it by using your F2 skill Radiant Resolve, and you can get it by entering your Radiant Forge through the trait Sovereign of Light. After getting a light aura, you detonate it using Piercing Aura, Effulgent Stance, or Daring Advance. And the other rotational aspects are going to be using skills in Radiant Forge. Your priority skills are using Skill 4 twice and Skill 2 twice, and be sure to use your virtues before you use those skills. The advantage of this build over some other power DPS builds is that it has high amounts available CC through a lot of its utility skills. I mean, the Guardian always has high CC, but this just has a ton of CC available to it. Moving on to the power Alacrity Luminary. For gear, you run the exact same equipment as the powered DPS Luminary, with the exception of 2 Diviner's Rings for additional boon duration. The food is also the same with Sous Vide Steak and Superior Sharpening Stones or Sweet and Spicy Butternut Squash. Your traits are basically the same with Radiance 333 and Zeal 223. The only difference is you will be running Luminary 312, taking the trait Resplendent Weaponry, which allows your Radiant Forge skills to provide boons to allies. The skills only are slightly adjusted by taking Resolute Stance as your heal skill, which is not mandatory. You can still take Litany of Wrath if you prefer it, but Resolute Stance does give you a little bit more group support. The only difference for this build as opposed to the power one in terms of rotation is that you will be using skills 4, 3, and 2 in Radiant Forge and popping all of your virtues off cooldown, which is essentially what you do with the power variation as well. In essence, this build is identical to the power DPS variation, minus some rings for more boon duration and the addition of skills in your Radiant Forge. You'll be doing the same thing in terms of building and detonating light auras and using your skills and utilities, prioritizing illuminated skills on Spear and your standard Greatsword rotation. For the final Luminary build, we have the Heal Alacrity Luminary. The Heal Luminary is fairly easy to pick up and play. It is a very spammy playstyle to generate its boons through Radiant Forge. It has access to a lot of the Guardian utility that everyone loves, and its primary difference from the Quickness Firebrand, as far as I can tell, is that it is far more spammy than it is predictive. For the Heal Luminary, you have a stricter skill usage rotation as opposed to just using your skills to predict boss actions, meaning that it is more so just a build that pumps out a lot of boons and heals consistently, as opposed to having levers to pull during different phases of an encounter. The gear is identical except for the relic to the Heal Quick Firebrand, with full Harrier's gear, Minstrel's gear, or a mix of Harriers and Givers and so on, with Runes of the Water and Relic of Caracosa, which gives you healing when you combo with a blast finisher. For weapons, you'll be using Staff Spear with concentration and transference on both weapon sets, and for food, you will be running Bowl of Fruit Salad with Mint Garnish and Bountiful Maintenance Oil, or Delicious Rice Balls as a non-ascended option. For traits, you are going to be running Honor 332, Virtues 333, and Luminary 3-1-1. Your utility skill recommendations are Resolute Stance, Hold the Line, with the remaining slots being flexed. For this build, you're going to generate your boons primarily through Radiant Forge, so popping your virtues and then utilizing your skills in Forge is the best way to generate a lot of boons for your party very quickly. Utilizing Illuminated Gleaming Disc for an additional Might and Fury bump while you're on Spear, and then Power on Staff is the best way to maintain Might. Cast your symbols off of cooldown and use your heal skill for burst healing and Condi cleanse for your group. Use Hold the Line off cooldown is a good way to maintain regen and protection, and realistically this build is very easy to upkeep boons. It lacks some of the predictive nature that other builds have. It plays more like a DPS class in terms of following a rotation to maintain boons and healing, as opposed to using heal skills when healing is required. You just kind of unga bunga and the heals and boons are generated. Out of all the builds that I mentioned, the Luminary are most likely to change or be iterated on. So as we move through 2026, these last Luminary builds are the ones to keep an eye on. The other ones mentioned are kind of tried and true. They're likely not going to change too much. Before I talk about where all these builds fit into the meta, I wanted to mention a few outliers and open world builds that we might want to consider. For the open world, I do prefer to run Power DPS Dragonhunter with one alteration. Instead of Relic of the Dragonhunter, I run Relic of Zakaros, and this allows me to fight champion mobs, survive group events that are low man, and just have a good time in open world without having to worry too much about self-healing while still being able to pump that high burst damage. For a strong Celestial build, you have the Celestial Heal Firebrand, which works as a hybrid build between the Condi Quickness Firebrand and the Heal Firebrand. And this build works as a healer for experienced groups where you could put out like 15 to 20k DPS as a healer in your group. This does cost some utility that a full healer provides, but it can be used to kind of solo open world content, and it'll make you feel really, really strong. The gear is full Celestial with leadership runes, Axe Torch with staff, and on Axe you run Smoldering and Torment Sigil, and on staff you run Transference and Water Sigils. Running either Condi DPS utilities like Mantra of Flame or Purging Flames, or more defensive utilities like Advance or Stand Your Ground are equally valid for both group play and solo play. I will say that if you are intending on playing this in a group setting over traditional heal builds, I would advise you play the Quickness and the heal variations, like both builds. Get comfortable there first, and then you can run this up in your group and try it out. Or you could just play the build solo and enjoy it as it is. So where do I think that these builds fall in the meta? Well, it is the Guardian, and they all really work out pretty well. However, I will say that the Condi Willbender is a standout build in terms of Condi DPS. That has high DPS, high mobility, making it useful for a lot of solo roles, especially the Gluttony role in 100 CM that is taken up by a Condi Willbender. Beyond that, the Heal Firebrand is also a very top tier build, and it has been for a long time. If you are going to learn a healing build, I would suggest the Heal Firebrand over the Heal Luminary. And as far as power DPS builds, the Power Dragonhunter and Power Luminary builds both kind of play very similarly. I think that the Power Dragonhunter is very tried and true. However, in fights that require high amounts of CC or are non-stationary targets, fights that move around a lot, the Power Luminary would be better. I do think that the Dragonhunter is more of a setup and burst type build, and a Luminary is more of a high APM play style. But the fact that the Luminary isn't really built around a single set of skills makes it easier to recover from rotational mistakes, and it makes it easier to navigate fights that have like long intermission phases. So it's not like you missed your burst window and it's not going to be available. But with that, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. I will try to answer them. I want to thank you guys for watching. A big thanks to all my subscribers, which if you're new here or a regular to the channel and you have not subscribed yet, please consider it. A very special thanks to all of my members who support the channel. Shout out to you guys, and give them a thanks in the comment section, because without them, I wouldn't be doing any of this. So I appreciate it. Thank you again for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.